Yeah, sure. So I think one helpful way to unpack a little bit this notion of state capitalism is to think about it as having two components or two dimensions or two legs. So one leg would be about state ownership. So that would cover things like sovereign wealth funds or other state-owned or state-controlled investment funds, like state-backed venture capital, that kind of stuff. Development and policy banks, so banks which are state-owned in some way. State enterprises, and other forms of state-owned corporate entities. And then we could also add central banks in this sort of broad category, right? Although they have a bit of a separate sort of position with respect to that, but we could also add them there. So immediately you can already see that, a country like the US, for instance, or countries in Western Europe, the central bank is very important in doing all sorts of things, which isn't much discussed or wasn't much discussed in the literature on state capitalism a little while ago, where there was this focus on those other state-owned corporate entities, saying that, yes, China, Brazil, Indonesia have a lot of state enterprises, so therefore they're state capitalists. But how about the US Federal Reserve? I mean, the role that it plays, not only in the US, but in the world economy, is absolutely massive. And so perhaps that's an interesting case of state capitalism, if you will. So that's the first sort of leg of state capitalism. The second leg is not about state ownership, but is about state interventionism. So states directly intervening in the economy, in investment relations, in trade relations, and in productive arrangements. And so here in this broad category, we can put a few things. We can put techno-industrial policy, development plans, trade and investment restrictions, and other forms of economic nationalism. And of course, state-directed or state-coordinated investment in large-scale infrastructure. So when we look at what happened about those two legs of state capitalism in the global economy over the past 20 years or so, so since the turn of the millennium, we see that there's been a massive expansion of all of those institutional and political forms. So that raises the question, what happens and why have we seen this aggregate expansion of the state's role, again, as an economic agent, as an industrial policy actor, as a promoter and regulator of capital, and as a direct owner of corporate entities? Now, as we suggested earlier, people looking at this from the perspective of comparative political economy would say, well, it's fine. I mean, the reason there is more state intervention, state ownership in the global economy and so on is because we've seen over the past 20 to 25 years the rise of those emerging market economies with their own distinctive models of capitalism, with a strong state role. Now, as you suggested, this is a very selective reading of the situation because there's also a lot of state intervention in the economies that were considered to be liberal or even neoliberal, right? You can think about the military-industrial complex in the US, for instance, which is absolutely key for the industrial structure of the US, or in terms of politics, same in France and in other places. So when we look, in fact, not at what is happening at the level of national political economies, but rather what is happening globally, we get a different picture. And so that encourages us to try and think about explanations for that, which are at the scale of the global economy. So one of the arguments we're making in the book is that in order to understand this aggregate expansion of the state's role in the economy and society, we need to look at the historical development and geographical remaking of global capitalism. We need to look at the international division of labor and how globalization of production, trade, and investment has reconfigured the role of the state, again, across the world economy, not just in emerging markets. We also need to look at things like patterns of economic growth and stagnation, which have also pushed states to intervene more. We need to look at patterns of technological development. We've seen the increasing importance of things like general purpose technologies, which have become so important for corporate strategies and for the competitiveness of national economies, which has also pushed states to intervene more via things like techno-industrial policy and so on. We've also seen partly as a result of this, global integration of the global economy, more emphasis put on connective infrastructure, things like railways, airports, ports, energy and transportation systems. Those have also, like the development of those connective infrastructure has also required extensive state intervention, both to fund and to coordinate the development of those infrastructure. So the point is, and so those are all factors that we unpack in the book and offer examples for. But the point is that the determinants of this expanded state role in the economy are not to be found at the national level. I mean, yes, there's immense diversity in terms of how national political economies are organized. And there's countries where the state appears more visible and appears to do more things than others. But there's also factors or forces that cut across national political economies. And again, which scale is the global or the planetary. So this is the type of argument we're trying to draw attention to in the book. We need to have a global outlook on those transformations.